This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
How do we grow and thrive after a traumatic loss? Few of us know how to navigate the territory of traumatic loss successfully. Sweet Sorrow shows how we can respond and grow stronger from loss and suffering. Written by psychologist and certified bereavement trauma specialist Dr. Sherry Cormier, Sweet Sorrow chronicles the decade following the loss of her husband, father, mother, and only sibling. Dr. Sherry's carefully considered work provides perspective on grief and healing over time. Its longer-term approach allows readers to have a more complete and accurate picture of the oscillations of grief over time. The book describes not only the immediate agony of the author's losses, but also the process of starting over and making a successful new life as a single person full of hope and joy. Sweet Sorrow combines Sherry's psychological expertise and clinical experience with the compelling art of memoir to illuminate the surprising ways in which lost survivors can grow and even thrive to achieve wholeness after heartbreaking traumatic losses. Using findings from post-traumatic growth as well as evidence-based psychological approaches, Sweet Sorrow illustrates through story and example ways for grief survivors to start over, tools to manage chaos and stress, how to let go and to heal with new strategies and restorying, resources and recommendations for self-care, tips and suggestions to respond creatively and helpfully to those around us suffering loss. Sweet Sorrow is a work of inspiration intended to accompany readers through the process of loss and grief, much like a helpful Sherpa might guide a lost traveler. The author provides critical insight into the journey of death as experienced by a spouse. Valeria interviews Dr. Sherry Cormier. Sherry is a psychologist and consultant who engages in public speaking, training, and grief mentoring. She is a former professor at both the University of Tennessee and West Virginia University. Cormier holds a bachelor's degree from Kansas State University, and both her master's and doctoral degrees are from Purdue University. She is the author of Counseling Strategies and Interventions for Professional Helpers, Pearson Education, 9th edition, and the co-author of Interviewing and Change Strategies for Helpers, Cengage Learning, 8th edition. She is the co-writer and co-producer of over 50 training videos for Cengage Learning. Here is the interview with Dr. Sherry Cormier.
In your own words, who is Sherry Cormier?
Oh, wow. These are great questions. Well, I could tell you the demographics. I'm a older female. I'm a widow. I was a wife. My husband died 11 years ago. I'm a mother to two wonderful daughters. I have a bonus daughter as well through my late husband. I have several wonderful grandchildren, and I consider myself a healer, a writer. I love to work with people. I'm very kind and compassionate. I'm very curious, adventurous, fun-loving. Is that enough?
That sounds really good. Yeah, really good. Yeah. Before we talk about some of the topics in your book, Sweet Sorrow, Find Enduring Wholeness After Loss and Grief, I have a few warm up questions for you, as I mentioned off record. What is life to you, Sherry?
What is life? Oh, wow. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and these are probably the most in-depth questions. What is life? Well, to me, life is, I really want to say life is love. Life is love. To me, life is love. Life is breath. To be fully alive, you are in the moment, you are breathing, you are mindful. But I think most of all, life is love.
What do you think is the opposite of life?
Well, I think hate. I think hate is the opposite of love. And I think that unfortunately, I think we're in a conflict right now almost between hate and love in the world, on the planet. I think there's a lot of hate that we see in everyday interactions, and even in how people treat Mother Earth, there's hate.
Do you connect hate to fear?
Yes. I think people who hate are afraid. I think hate does come out of fear. I also think hate comes out of ignorance, just sheer, utter ignorance of not knowing and not being curious enough to want to know.
Which from all of that comes judgment. Instead of asking questions, we.
Yes.
What is the meaning of freedom to you?
Well, it's really
Right.
good, Valeria. Uh, freedom. Well, I'm laughing because we're all under, well, most of us, I certainly am in a state where I'm still under COVID-19 shelter in place. Many of us are. So we're finding the opposite, I guess, of freedom, which is restriction. I don't think freedom. I think freedom is having choices, but I don't think that it means just the ability to do as you please without being concerned for your fellow traveler on the journey. Because, for example, under COVID, if we all did as we please now, we could be making some people very sick and dying. And that to me is not freedom. That's not, that's like freedom is choice with limitation.
I like that. Yeah. That ability to choosing wisely.
Choosing wisely. Yes.
At this time, what do you think is the world's greatest need? And what is your vision for a new reality?
Well, I guess I think the world's greatest need is uh, love and compassion, because I do believe that if we all practice love and compassion, a lot of the problems we're seeing in the world today would diminish or go away or would cease to exist, and we would have peace, and we would be concerned about people around the world who are starving, and people around the world who don't have health care, and people around the world who don't have employment. And very wealthy people would not be trying to hold on to their financial empire, but we would be sharing our resources. And I think in terms of the vision, I think what's happening now in 2020 is we're seeing this huge energetic sort of vibrational shakeup in the planet. And I think we're really moving away from very patriarchal energy. And I like to believe that we need much more energy of the divine feminine present in the world. And I'd like to believe that we are moving toward that. And I think that's certainly a vision that I think is worth moving toward. And getting much more balanced in the way that we approach life and on our issues in the world.
Right. Yeah, balancing these two energies, right?
Yes.
You also mentioned compassion and love. So I'm wondering what the difference is.
I don't know that there's a big difference. I think that there's a little bit of a difference though, because you can be compassionate towards someone and not necessarily be loving. Or I mean, I think to love, you almost have to really know someone. So, I love people in my family because I know them. So I think compassion is more general. I think we can show compassion to people we don't know, to strangers, to the delivery person, to the store clerk, to the homeless person. We don't know them, and we don't need to know people to show compassion.
Yeah, at a personal level, right?
Right. We don't need to know them at a personal level to demonstrate compassion.
That makes sense. What, where, and who is God to you?
Oh, what, where, and who is God? Oh, my goodness. What, where, and who is God? Well, I believe that different people have different faith traditions. And so while there might be some people that might view God in a very traditional sense, there might be other people that view God as a higher power, or there might be people who view God as a goddess or a woman, or um, maybe a monk or something like that. I think whatever your faith heritage says to you about God, what I would say is that God, I'm using God in quotes for however a person may define God. God is everywhere, and God is all love. God is
Mm,
love.
right. So, in a way, you answered my follow up question about the difference between religion and spirituality.
Yes.
So, two more questions. Yeah. What do you think is the purpose of life?
I think the purpose of life is to love, is to show compassion, to be there for other people, to help. And I think meaning of life is really found. I don't think we find purpose or meaning in life by sitting in a little corner and um, watching movies all day. I think that meaning or purpose is developed through contribution, through service, through ways that we find to take our unique gifts and give them to the world.
That's a great answer. What do you think your unique gifts are?
What are my unique gifts? Oh, wow. These are really hard questions. I'm laughing. I'm really laughing because, I'm thinking, I'm not sure these are warm ups.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
what are my unique gifts? I think we all do have unique gifts. And I've always been told by my students and clients and friends that I'm a very giving person. I do think I'm a really wonderful listener. I think that I have a really good gift of listening and of helping people kind of put things together that they're struggling with, and trying to listen to that and sort of help them make headway with issues that they're trying to resolve. And I think I have a gift for writing. I think I have a gift for networking. I think I'm a fairly loving, compassionate, kind, non-judgmental person, because I don't think judgment changes anything.
I love the way you speak of yourself because I really believe in unconditional self love. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I do too.
So let's talk about your work. And my first questions, they had to be these. uh, um, how did you become a writer? But before that, why did you become a psychologist?
Right. Okay. So those are good questions. Those are a little
Or easier,
easier for
right?
me. Yeah. They're warm-up questions. Um, well, about the psychologist part, which I guess that started about the same time, though, as the writing piece. I've always been really fascinated by people. I'm interested in people. I love to work with people. I would not be somebody that would be happy sitting behind a desk and looking at numbers all day or working with machines. And in fact, just before this, I was told that my voicemail box was full on my mobile phone. And I went to try to find it to, you know, work with that, and I couldn't even find it. So I would not be a good engineer or, or an architect. I just wouldn't be. So I've always loved working with people. I was working with people as a college students in groups. I was involved in a lot of leadership projects. I like that. And psychology, is sort of really is the study of human behavior. And so, because I do think I'm a very, very curious person. And I think that served me well in life. So I think it was kind of a natural because I love people and I love learning and I'm very curious that psychology was just sort of a good choice for me because it fit my interests. And when I started doing graduate work in psychology, it was emphasized to us that if we were going to pursue an academic position, which I did pursue, I'm not now, but I have been an academic, that we would have to publish or perish, as the phrase goes, publish or perish. Well, I did not want to perish. So
Right. Of course not.
not at my tender young age then, especially. Well, I don't want to perish now either. So I started writing actually psychology textbooks. And I've written psychology textbooks for something like an embarrassing number of years, about 45 years I've been writing college psychology textbooks. I've gone through a lot of editions. I loved writing textbooks because you're always updating them. And so I could always learn and I could always be curious and read more research. But then I wanted to write a self help book, which I use that phrase lightly. I think, I think we do need to help ourselves. I think the airlines get this right when they say, put your own oxygen mask on first. But I also think that I've heard a few people say, well, self-help isn't correct because we want to be helping other people. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I mean, you put your own oxygen mask on first, but it doesn't mean that you sit there and they ignore the fact that your seatmate isn't breathing. It just means that you help yourself first and then you turn to people around you and you're helping other people. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. So I wanted to write a book that was helpful to people, and I decided to write about initially about grief and loss because that was has been sort of my own personal story for the last 11 years. And when my father and husband died 11 years ago within 3 months of one another, Valeria, I could not find a really good book that helped me on the kinds of feelings that I was having. So I thought, well, I'll just write my own. And I did.
Yeah, very good idea. Actually, it's beautifully written. So much information. I have lots of questions for you here on that topic. I think you already mentioned the inspiration to write that book. So was losing people. But what was the intention of writing your book, Sweet Sorrow?
Well, my intention was really several fold, several things. I wanted to write a book that was both, I guess, comforting. I wanted to bring comfort to people. And I also wanted to provide information to people. And so, some people have said your book is sort of like a guidebook. because it's very inspirational, it's very comforting, and at the same time, there's a lot of really good psychological information in there that can be used for someone who is in the middle of a grief journey. And aren't we all in the middle of a grief journey now with this pandemic? That's what I've heard from so many people is, we're the losses, and it's just not financial losses, job losses, but just even being sheltered in place and losing our chance to see our families on Mother's Day or holidays or our friends, and, loss of our routines, loss of children going to school, loss of graduating seniors, getting to walk through commencement. So, I mean, I could go on.
Right. So in a way, life and death, they are inseparable.
Yes.
Death is part of life, not the opposite of life. Yeah, let's talk about that. How losing people you love changed the way you perceive yourself and life.
Well, I think losing people, what it really changed was it changed the fact that I don't see this, what you just mentioned, I don't anymore see this sort of artificial dichotomy between life and death. Because I feel like at the moment, in fact, I sort of don't even call it death anymore. I call it transition. But what dies is to me is the physical body. Something happens to our physical body that causes our physical body to no longer function well, and then the physical body dies. What I felt like I learned with all my losses, and they were all people that I really cared about and was very close to, which may have made a big difference. But I felt like I learned that the energy or the vibration or the spirit of the person still lives. I've gotten so many messages, particularly from my late husband. I still get messages from him 11 years later. And so I feel like it's not an artificial dichotomy, that yes, the physical body does die, but the energy of the person is always around us. And in that sense, the person's spirit is still alive with us. And that really changed my views about life and death. And it also took my fear of dying away. I mean, I'm not ready to die physically, but I don't have this fear of, I don't have this sort of awful nagging fear about dying anymore either. And it also really made me appreciate. I've heard a lot of COVID survivors say this too now. It really made me appreciate how precious life is. And it's so easy to take even simple things like our breathing for granted. And so I think, one of the lessons, it increased my mindfulness. I pay much more attention to things like the birds and how the birds sound in song, and the wind in the trees and the clouds in the sky, and all of those things. And I feel much more grateful for everything. And I'm much less likely to complain about things because there's so many things, even in the pandemic, I think there are gifts. I mean, I talked about all the losses, and that's true. There are losses, and yet there's also gains. I mean, I found what a luxury to be able to have time to take a nap.
True.
What
Yeah.
what a luxury to have time
Mm.
to go outside and walk and not feel rushed. What a luxury to for the planet to be getting some fresh air because we've parked our cars, and the the climate is being able to take deep breaths now in a way that it didn't. So there's so many pluses for what's happening right now too, and just even having the luxury of more time. We have more time. We're at home. We have more time in for the most part. maybe not every day, but I've had time to talk to very old friends that I haven't talked with for some time and just develop some reconnection. And I think that's been wonderful.
Right. Yeah. Being able to see the opportunities for growth in the midst of chaos or traumatic loss. So, how do we learn to do that, Sherry?
Well, it's not something that comes right away in the midst of loss. I will say that. Um, in the when we lose something or we lose someone, we lose something precious to us like a job or a dream. Even losing a dream can be very shattering. Or we lose someone very close to us. It throws us off balance. It throws us off kilter because it turns our life upside down. I mean, I'm much more used to the rhythm now of sheltering at home, but I've been doing it now about 2 months. And goodness, the first several weeks, I felt so out of whack.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
it was just strange.
Yeah.
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
And so at first, our first job probably is not growth. Our first job is finding equanimity, like regaining our footing. Like when we're in the middle of loss, when it first happens, our initial impetus should be just to regain our footing and to recover our balance and find and maintain our equilibrium. That's kind of our first job because our life has, as we knew it, has changed dramatically. And so once we do that, that's kind of the first step. Once we do that, Valeria, then I think we can say and we can start saying, okay, where is the growth piece in this? If grief is a teacher, what are my lessons?
Right. I love
What
that.
are my lessons? And
Yeah.
if loss is an opportunity, what are the opportunities? If there's a gain for a loss, what are my gains? What are ways? What are kind of my edges that I need to grow in or could grow in? And I've seen so many dramatic changes in grief survivors because I do a lot of public speaking now. I do a lot of training. I do volunteer work with bereavement and bereaved survivors. And I'm amazed. I'm always amazed at people that will say things like, when like, let's say someone lost their partner, and they'll say, when I was living with or married to Joe, a woman might say, I was very timid and I never wanted to travel. But now that Joe's gone, I find myself traveling all the time because maybe I want to go see my kids or grandkids, or maybe I want to carry on something of Joe's legacy, which means I have to travel in order to do that. And so I think that I have seen grief survivors take tremendous steps when it comes to growth and have really grown in ways that they do things they would have never imagined doing before the loss, myself included.
But in order to do that, it takes that first stage or step that you mentioned, equanimity, calm, and balance, right? So you mentioned the process of grieving, it evolves. So I'm just wondering if this relates to the stages of grief that has been published and talked about.
Right. So I'm glad you asked that because, the stages of grief are not, they were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she really did not develop these as stages for grievers. She developed them as stages for people who were dying. And they're not particularly applicable to those of us who are grieving a loss. It's not to say that we don't experience the things that she talked about. She talked about being in denial and bargaining and being angry and then coming to a place of acceptance. It's not that we may not experience those things, we may, but grief, I don't believe, is a linear thing. It's not like you go through one stage and then you're at another stage and then you're at another stage. I think grief is very cyclical. And I like to compare it to the waves of an ocean. So, the waves will come in and the waves will go out. And some days the waves are calm. And then some days there's a storm and the waves are overpowering. And to me, that's grief, that you can have very calm, placid days where you don't notice much. And then you can have other days, and they might even be years later when you get hit with something that brings it all back. And it's like standing up in the face of this Herculean wave that is coming at you. And then all of a sudden you're flattened by the water and you kind of don't know what hit you.
I'm wondering if that has to do with what some spiritual traditions they call attachment. The more attached we are to someone or something, the more challenging will be to let go, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the deeper the grief, the greater the love, the deeper the grief.
Do you think we can somehow prepare for losing someone we deeply love? Is that possible?
Well, I'm kind of laughing because I think we can prepare intellectually. We can say, we can talk to other people who've gone through it and we can kind of prepare our mind for it. I think it's pretty hard to prepare emotionally for it. I think being a psychologist, I had worked with a lot of grievers. I knew intellectually what to expect, but I was absolutely bereft after I lost my husband. I had days where I just thought, how am I going to go on? Because I was so bereft and so grief stricken, and I just could not, it was like I just couldn't quite see where the joy was at that moment. So I think we can prepare intellectually, but I think emotionally we is another story. Well, I was going to say, I think that's sometimes why it's hard for people who've never really lost someone close to them to know exactly what to say to someone who does, because they haven't quite experienced it. And so they feel at a loss for words, or they're not quite sure what to do or what to say. And I understand that. I get that.
What is the best way to communicate with people who have lost someone close to them and they deeply loved when they have no experience at all?
Yes. I think if you're unsure, you just say that. You can say, I'm really sorry. I heard that you lost Maria, and I'm really sorry that you did. I haven't gone through anything quite like this, and I don't know exactly what I could say that would be helpful. But I just want you to know that how sorry I am, and I also want you to know that I'd love to be helpful in whatever way might be helpful to you. Because sometimes people need we need people when we're a grief survivor, we need people to be able to listen to us, but we also need people to be able to sometimes do things for us, very concrete things, like go pick up groceries or go pick up someone from the airport coming in for a service. Sometimes we even need people to distract us, like just take us out, to have some coffee or something, or, do something that's fun. So there's different ways that we can be helpful to people, and we don't all have to, serve the same function to be helpful to people who are grieving.
Yeah, I like what you just said because most time we tend to say things like, I'm here if you need me, or I'm here for you. But what are you saying that we need to take action?
Yes, and really ask the person very directly, because when you're in the middle of grief, your energy is low and you're not likely to pick up the phone. But if someone says very directly, "I'd really like to help. How can I help?" Then I might be likely to say, "Well, I really could use this. I really could use this." But if you just say, "I'm here for you," it's so general that I might not reach out to you.
True. And that's another question about this support from friends and family. This is another thing that I notice happens a lot. In the beginning, everyone is trying to help, they're present, but then after a month or two or three, they just disappear.
Yeah. And that's so important. That's so important you bring that up. I'm so glad. Yeah, I think that's a really difficult thing that happens. It happened to me. It happens to most people. We're flooded at the beginning. It's almost too intense. We have too many people coming over. We have too many calls, too many texts, too many cards, too many flowers, too many casseroles. And then people go get busy with their lives and they forget. And we're still in the middle of grief. And sometimes, because there can be a lot to do in the middle of a grief episode, we can have things we have to take care of. Sometimes, we can be busy and then the grief sets in 6, 9, even a year later, even sometimes the second year after we lose something or someone can be very hard. So we have to really remember to be in it for the long haul with people and keep checking on people. Keep reaching out several months, reach out and call them and say, I know it's a little later. Do you need anything? How are you doing? I'm still thinking about you. I'm still hoping there's some way that I can be of help. And just don't drop it, because most people drop it. And then when you're in the kind of the throes of grief and you're feeling you're at your worst, you might be feeling the most alone and the most isolated
Yeah, that's such a reality, something that happens all the time, right?
all the time, because we just get busy. I mean, we get caught up in our own lives again and we get busy. Even when we're not grieving, I think that it's so important, even if we just put grief aside for a minute, when we care about people. I mean, we talked earlier about love and compassion. When we have family and friends that we care about, isn't part of showing our compassion remembering those people and reaching out to them periodically to check in and see how they're doing, and expressing our warm wishes, and just continuing to maintain the connection with people. That's how we do it.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And that kind of brings me to the question about being uncomfortable around grief and loss that you mentioned. You call it being phobic about grief and loss. Is that something that's real? Sherry, from you?
Yes. In the United States, I think particularly, not so much in some other countries, but in the United States, we tend to be fairly grief avoidant or grief phobic. We really don't want to talk about grief. We don't really want to go to the dark side. We don't want to get mired down in something that might make us feel sad, for heaven forbid.
Right.
Uh, and so, for example, a great example of this is businesses will often give somebody. I mean, I have a friend who just lost her dad, and she got, I think, 3 days of leave. 3 days of leave, and you've lost your parent. I mean, she had to take paid days off because she wasn't ready to go back to work in 3 days. Plus, she had things to do legally too. But emotionally, she wasn't ready. But, then you go back to work and nobody wants to hear about it. They want you to come back. And if you are sad, they want you to go hide in the bathroom because they don't want to see your tears. Very few people do. you know, but it's the yin and the yang. Like we have darkness and light, we have sweetness and sorrow, we have, it's both and. So,
I agree. So, how do we change that? How do we begin to think differently about grief?
well, I think just you're changing it, Valeria, by having this podcast. I think we change it by getting grief on the table, by bringing it out of the shadows and out of the closet and into the light. And we have conversations about it and we educate ourselves about it and we get curious about it. And, we try to overcome our own individual discomfort with loss. And so that we, sort of practice reaching out to people who have lost something or someone. And this is a great time because there are so many losses in COVID. I mean, even if it's something like I have a neighbor who didn't get to uh, go on her senior trip and didn't get to have her senior prom and didn't get to walk through, just even like going up to her and saying, I'm really sorry that you missed out on these things. That's a good way to kind of practice not being avoidant is look out for people. When someone's lost something. I think we know when someone's lost someone. And instead of like running the other way and not seeing them, actually moving toward them and speaking about what it is that they have lost and engaging in a conversation with them.
Yes. And that makes me think about wisdom and going back to the compassion has a lot to do with wisdom, understanding that life includes everything. Everything's possible. And this is like you call it a journey. I love the way you said it earlier about the traveler. Yeah, we all traveling here, travelers. Hmm.
Yes. We're fellow travelers on this journey called life.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. Do you think that sorrow and joy can coexist?
Yes, I do. I think it's almost impossible to have one without the other. I really do, just like light and darkness. And I think one of the reasons why people are grief phobic is they think if I feel sorrowful, I'll be stuck there. But you really aren't stuck. I mean, even in the midst of grief, in the midst of a really hard loss, when you might be hitting rock bottom, someone can come along and say something funny to you and you can laugh and you can feel joy again. So I think sorrow and joy do coexist. And in fact, I think it's very difficult to really know joy and really feel great joy if you don't ever allow yourself to feel sad or sorrow. I think they go hand in hand. And, we need to remember that feelings are impermanent, that we don't get stuck in sorrow. We also don't get stuck in joy because, things move through us energetically. And so we may be very joyful for some day, during a day, and then something could happen and we could feel sorrowful, and then the energy of that moves through and then we feel joyful again, and then the energy of that moves through and something else happens and we feel sorrowful, and it's all an energetic movement.
Yeah, and that's life.
That's life.
That's what it means to be alive, right?
Yes, yes.
Let me move the conversation to the experiences you had after Jay passed, the dreams. That was very interesting. So, talk to me about those experiences.
Well, my late husband, yes, his name was Jay, and we were very, very close. I think we were, soulmates, really. I think we are still soulmates. And we watched the movie. It's an old movie called Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. We had watched that movie about 10 times together, and we had always said, "This is us. If one of us goes, the one who goes first will contact the one who's left." And so I've had a lot of messages from Jay. Some of them have been physical messages, like just a couple weeks ago, I have a closet in my bedroom that has a motion light in it. So the light only turns on if you open the door. And I was laying in bed and getting ready to fall asleep, and all of a sudden the motion light in the closet came on. And, I'm not anywhere near the closet. And I live alone and nobody else is in the house. And then it goes off. And then it does that a couple times. So I've gotten messages like that, but I've had a lot of dreams from Jay. Some of them were dreams about his process, what he was going through. Some of them were dreams for me. Had messages for me. One of the dreams that I love to tell people was, because it's a very short dream, so it's very easy to talk about in a podcast. But one time he came to me in the middle of the night, and I would usually wake up and see his face in front of me. And I just looked at him and I said, "Honey, what is it like to die?" And he said, "Just wait. Just wait. It's genius. It's genius." Well,
Wow.
I mean, I have never forgotten that dream. I tell that dream just about every training I do. That was one dream that really did take my fear of dying away. And I mean, in so many of the dreams, I could tell that his spirit still alive. And he talked with me about how, shortly after his physical body had died, he came in dreams and gave me messages in dreams about how he was going through a spiritual rehabilitation process. And he was learning things that he didn't learn when he had been incarnated on earth. And some of the lessons that he was learning that were good lessons for him. And um, so I've gotten so many dreams and so many messages, and I feel his guidance really all around me. And I have conversations with him. Well, if I'm in a dilemma, I will often just say, "Honey, this is my dilemma. If you feel like you're able to and you have a message for me, I'm welcome. I'd be most welcome to hear it." I have gone to several psychics and mediums, and I've gotten messages from him that way as well. Um, so just be open to it. There's a real metaphysical quality to this. And I think if we're open to this, we can really get connections with a person who's left their physical body.
Yeah. So these experiences made you believe in life after death, or there's no separation between life and death?
Yes. Well, maybe both. I mean, I would say both. It did make me believe that there's some energetic form that exists in life after death, and that there isn't really kind of no separation either in life and death, just like there's sort of no time and space. And, I've read a lot about people who've had NDEs or near death experiences, and they will talk about this too, that they maybe actually had died, their physical body had died, and then they were brought back to life. But they said there was some part of them that never died, that they were always still there, even when the physical body was not breathing or was brain dead for a few minutes or something like that. There was a part of them that they said was always still there.
It also ends the fear of death, which is a wonderful thing to live in such a way. I would love for you to read a passage in your book where Jay writes about control and our own truth. That was such an interesting passage.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah, this was a note. Yeah, this was a note that he had written when he had stage 4 cancer, and if he couldn't sleep, he would get up and write these things, which I found after his physical body died. The issue of control, he said, interesting word. Most seem to want it. Many fear losing it. Some think it's an illusion. Others see control as a problem rather than a solution. Well, I think at best, I have control of myself when I can direct my attention toward a truth about me. When I do not want to face a truth that is beyond the boundary of my self acceptance, I will usually try to control others or a situation.
Mm. Wow, that is such a powerful statement, message, really.
He was a very wise man. He was a very wise man. He was a psychotherapist. He donated his body to medicine, to science. And then we had a memorial service about 2 months after his date of physical body transition. And so many of his clients came to his service. And even though there's HIPAA, which means you don't really tell anyone, people just got up and they said in front of all these people, I was his client. And oh my God, he did this for me and he did this for me and he did this for me. He was a really, truly wizard of a psychotherapist. He was a marvelous psychotherapist. He was one of the most loving and but most insightful, wise persons I've known.
Yes, I can sense that wisdom. It's profound wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. And I also love the way you ended that section with I love you, I miss you, but most of all, I remember you. Yeah, that remembering. Beautiful. Would you like to add anything, Sherry, before I ask you my final questions?
I think that's it. I really want to say that I'm really grateful to you for asking me to be on your podcast, and I want to wish your listeners peace and comfort and joy as they travel on life.
Yeah, I love that traveling thing. Yeah, the travelers, right? Thank you. Thank you for your presence and your wisdom too. So, my final questions: what was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself in life?
I think my hardest lesson has been something you mentioned earlier, and that was like how we can be attached to someone or something, and yet it's often we need to be able to learn to let go. So how are we attached in a healthy way? How can we be attached to a person or a situation or something we love, but not so attached to it that we just feel decimated if we are, the thought of letting go. That's probably been my hardest lesson.
It's so true. And that might go back to that what we talked earlier too about unconditional self-love. So that goes back to love. And always goes back to love. So it seems to me if we love ourselves unconditionally, then we let go with grace.
We surrender. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What is another word for healing?
Another word for healing, I think I would say wholeness. Wholeness, because I think when you are healed or healing, you are on the path to becoming whole, WHOLE. Then I think being healed is synonymous pretty much with being whole in like body, mind, and spirit.
Yes, I agree. And two more questions. If you knew you would leave the body soon, would you make any change in your life or do anything differently?
Oh, that's such a fabulous question. That's kind of like if you had a year to live question,
Yes, right, right.
which I think it's a question we all need to be constantly asking ourselves because otherwise we really don't know whether we're living our true values or not. Um, if someone said to me, "You have a year to live," I guess what I would do something differently, and I would spend the year pretty much exclusively with my two daughters and my grandchildren who do not live near me. So we all live in different states. And so if I knew my time was going to be very limited, and I try to spend what's hard right now, right, during
Yeah,
COVID, because you
right.
can't.
True. Yeah.
And that's been really
That's true.
challenging.
Yeah.
But I would really want to sort of soak up the year with my daughters and granddaughters. I just think being a mom is, I know yesterday was Mother's Day. Being a mom is just, it's been one of the greatest privileges and honors of my life. I love being a mom. I love that my daughters are moms now. Um, and just being around my daughters and their wonderful hubbies and my my wonderful granddaughter and wonderful little baby grandson just brings me immense joy. Immense joy. I mean, so yeah, that's probably what I would be doing. I wouldn't be lying on a beach somewhere. I wouldn't be out traveling somewhere. I really do I really do intentionally try to create opportunity to spend a lot of really good quality time with my own family because they're just very, very precious to me.
Right. Oh, it sounds really wonderful. It is a question, I believe it's to be reflected upon every single day, right? Because sometimes we won't get to have a year to live a lot of times, even much less.
No, no, my husband didn't. He had 6 months. Once he was diagnosed, he had 6 months. And, people with COVID, they can be gone in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
What are three things about life you know for sure?
Oh, I don't know if I know anything for sure.
That's a good answer, too.
Well, there's some things I know about life for sure. Well, I mean, I know that we all have the capacity to be far more loving than we probably are. I think we all have the capacity as human beings for great love and great insight. I also think one thing I know pretty sure is that most things are impermanent. That we don't stay in our physical body forever because it gets old. Our feelings and beliefs and thoughts are not permanent. We don't get stuck in certain ways that we feel or think or believe. Things change. I think that's one thing I know for sure. Things change all the time. All the time. Things are always changing. So maybe those are two things I know for sure. Change is around us, and we are capable of great love and great wisdom.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your presence, Sherry. Has been a joy. So beautiful. Thank you. Fun. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So you can find Sweet Sorrow in. It's hard to go to bookstores now. It's in Barnes and Noble, but it's online. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Target, or sometimes as I like to call it, Target.
That's cute.
Um, so all of those online retailers. We're all shopping a lot online these days. I know libraries may have some copies. I'm on Facebook, Sherry Cormier, Cormier, at Sweet Sorrow Book. I'm on Twitter, Sherry Cormier at Sweet Sorrow Book. And then my website is Sherry Cormier author, AUTHOR, just like it sounds. SherryCormierAuthor.com is my website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again. Go talk soon, Sherry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Dr. Sherry Cormier, please visit her website, sherrycormierauthor.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.